listing for a director of music strategy and operations, thinking that they were finally looking to replace Def Rebel, who has been responsible for composing most of the WWE themes that we hear for the past 5 years. It's been a very dark 5 years. So they replaced CFOs. CFOs disbanded not long after that. They're not even together anymore. That whole situation was a mess. CFOs tried to get WWE to buy them out of their deal with their music label, and WWE was on board with the idea. They were interested in bringing them in-house, but the label rejected the idea. So that was the end of CFOs. CFOs had some banger themes. And to be fair, Def Rebel has had a few banger themes. They're not all crap. But the vast majority of the themes that they have composed, they sound like generic AI-generated just track. So many of their songs, one track is completely indistinguishable from the next. There's no personality to them. There's no soul to them. And it has ruined a lot of Royal Rumbles in recent years because they play someone's music. I was in the crowd for the Rumble in Tampa this year before the roof blew off. And there were lots of times where they would count down to the next wrestler. They would hit their music. And if you weren't looking up at the screen to see the person's name on the Tron, you would never know who was coming out. It happened a lot in the Women's Rumble especially. Like I would hear the music and I would think, who the fuck is this? Like that one time in Be the Booker where I landed on No Way Jose. I said, who the fuck is that? For a good 5 seconds, I legitimately had no idea who I was looking at. And it has created a situation now where WWE music has never been as bad as it is right now. Like as hot as the product is, you would think they would do something about their music. Entrance music is such an important part of a wrestler's presentation. And it's not just bad themes, like it's the wrestlers that had great themes and then they get downgraded. And maybe there's some legal reason for it, but it doesn't make it any better. Look at Sheamus. And I'm not even talking about his original Lobsterhead theme. And yes, it will forever be the Lobsterhead theme to me. I don't care if that's not what's actually being said. It's a shameful thing that they brought it back for all of 2 weeks and then got rid of it again, but you know, even his Hellfire theme was pretty badass. And now, look what they've given him. They've given him generic Irish music. The worst theme that he has had in his 15 years on TV. Look at AJ Styles. Look at Johnny Gargano. That updated version of Rebel Heart. I mean, it stinks worse than whatever it was that died in my wall last year. It's completely inferior to the original. Braun Breaker, he's gone through like 3 or 4 different themes since coming up to the main roster. I think they finally settled on one, I hope. Anyway, all that to say, don't get too excited. According to a Fightful Select report, the job posting is strictly on the administrative side of the music division and not on the composer side. Also spoke to several WWE talents with Def Rebel themes, and most of them were frustrated with what they had. Some even said that they weren't told why their music was changed from CFOs produced songs to Def Rebel, and they have never had direct contact with Def Rebel. One source jokingly asserted that at one point, Judgment Day, Damage Control, and Seth Rollins all had similar themes. For a period of a few years, any one of a dozen people could have been coming out, talent allegedly said. And on prior reports that WWE would begin using licensed music for their talent like A was done. Sean Ross Sapp said that his sources had not heard any plans for that, and that wrestlers who inquired about the rumors were told that long-term clearances have become an issue. Despite this, WWE still plans to further incorporate licensed music into their shows and PLEs to an extent. Fightful also confirmed reports that Def Rebel produced several remixes of Randy Orton's Voices theme, which Orton rejected. Their sources also debunked rumors that talent theme changes have been mandated by changing regimes, and that those who still have Jim Johnston-era themes have never been approached for replacement. Sapp also inquired about the reported rights issues between WWE and CFOs, noting that unlike with Def Rebel, CFOs was in direct contact with talent. They confirmed that Jim Johnston will likely never return to WWE because he's in his 70s now, and there is no indication what his relationship is with them. Well, I mean, look, if nothing else, the man belongs in the Hall of Fame, so I would certainly hope one day they can reestablish contact enough to get him in there because he belongs in there. You know, a few months ago, there was a report that claimed WWE was looking to end its relationship with Def Rebel and was not planning to renew its contract with them when it expired in favor of using more mainstream artists, which is where I think that report came from that Sapp inquired about, and also why WWE had no idea what he was talking about. That report came from a Twitter account called Pro Wrestling Nexus, which doesn't even exist anymore. You click on the handle and it takes you to the page and it's not even active. So hardly a reliable source of information. And sadly, I have not seen that reported anywhere else by any reputable outlet, so I think it was just fake news. Although again, Sapp has said that WWE is aware of all of the Def Rebel hate. How can they not be? There's so much of it. I hope they take it to heart. I know there's great talent out there. I've interacted with some of them. I know there's great talent out there. Look at Mikey Ruckus in AEW. He's done some great work. I love his No Control song that he used for the main menu in the Fight Forever game. It's got a little Linkin Park vibe to it. But they need to find someone. And it doesn't have to be Jim Johnston. Jim Johnston is not coming back. They don't want him back. I don't know why, but they don't. And I know Mikey Ruckus, he was very put off by some comments that Jim Johnston made in an interview a while back. Jim was talking about wrestling music today, and he said that it's so bad, it just sounds like, it's just sound effects and noises. He said it doesn't have anything to do with the characters, it doesn't have anything to do with the storylines anymore. He said that is the essence of the business, and now it is lost. Jim used sound effects in his songs too. Okay, so let's not kid ourselves, but he did it in a very effective way. When you hear the glass shatter, you know that Stone Cold is about to march down to the ring and kick someone's ass. You identify that glass shatter with Steve Austin. When you hear the Undertaker's gong, right, you know the lights are about to go out and shit's about to go down. It's iconic. Look at WrestleMania this year when The Rock was in the ring and the gong went off. The place went nuts. The Undertaker has been using that gong since 1991. It has stood the test of time. Bret Hart and his opening guitar riff, right? It's like Okada and the coin flip. You instantly associate that sound with the performer, and it gets a reaction. But Jim Johnston also had a process for how he would come up with someone's music. And it wasn't even that he would meet with them or talk with them personally. I mean, it's possible he did, have interactions with some of the talent, but it wasn't like, well, I had to always talk to them and get on the phone with them. No, like he would watch them. He would watch video of them walking to the ring. He would watch their entrance. He would study the way they walked out, if they were big, if they were small, what were they wearing, how were they dressed. And out of that, he would get a sense of who they are, and then he would come up with a tune. He would come up with a beat for them. And it would just go from there. Like, if you get the chance, you have to look up the videos on WWE's YouTube channel from years ago. But there's a video on the making of Randy Orton's Voices theme with Jim Johnston. It really gives you a sense of how he did things. But Ruckus was upset with him over those comments that he made, and I think part of it may have been that, Ruckus is friends with the Def Rebel guys, so it was, I think, partially a case of him sticking up for his friends. But he thought that it was classless of him to make those comments and shit on the current generation of composers and musicians. Instead of giving advice and imparting his wisdom, the way that veteran wrestlers do with younger talent, he thinks that it should work the same way on the music end, too. Instead of someone just tearing other people down. I don't see it as exactly the same thing. First of all, Jim Johnston, it's not like Jim Johnston retired. He didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I think I'm done. And then decided to sit at home and just bitch about everything. He got fired. He believes that there were forces behind the scenes that did not like him, and they pushed him out. And he was obviously very upset about it. It was not a mutual parting of ways. He would very likely still be working there right now if it were up to him. Were his comments harsh? Sure. Were they wrong? No, they weren't. He was very very honest and I thought very accurate in what he was saying. There is a sameness to a lot of the music that we hear today. There is a lot of mediocre music that we hear today. And I would rather he be honest about it so that people can try to fix it rather than sugarcoat things because they're afraid of hurting other people's feelings. I liken it to a lot of the AEW criticism lately. There's a lot of valid criticism about AEW's creative direction, and we should be allowed to talk about it rather than feel like we have to lie because people who work there or people who follow the product might get their feelings hurt. If you lie about it or you don't say anything, then they think everything is fine and there's nothing to fix. And maybe part of the problem also, quite frankly, is relying on one person or one group for all of their theme music. You know, we talk about Jim Johnston, right? Think about how big the roster was back then as compared to how big it is today. The roster is exponentially larger now than it was 20 years ago. They have so many more people to make music for, it's no wonder so much of it sounds the same. Maybe they should employ a few different people or a few different groups who can come at it from different perspectives. Maybe that would help avoid the generic mess that we have now.
Those Americans who got caught